do 3 minutes camera shooting with the flashlight. Thank you. Saya Kasandan, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Saya Klassen from TICAD 4 NGO Network. From now on, I and Bas are going to facilitate the session. We would like to have vibrant Africa, vibrant African people, and a vibrant discussion. So let's try to keep our time. Okay, so Bas, it's your turn.
Well, I can tell you that standing there, 6 minutes goes very fast. So unfortunately, we have a very distinguished panel that's going to comment on what we have presented, and unfortunately, each of them have 3 minutes. So it's both an honor for me, but also I'm a little intimidated, Mr. Chisano, as you would like to be called now, who is such a distinguished African former president and a real role model for the rest of us. So I would like to give you 3 minutes to comment on these issues. He will be the first role model on 3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I have very little to comment because I'm not very well prepared. And there's a saying which says that if you are not prepared, you have no right to the floor. So, but I thank you for accepting me here with my unpreparedness. I'm happy that I am for the first time attending a meeting of civil society in a time when I am really doing a work of civil society. I want to support one thing here, that civil society is part of the democratization. Parties alone are not all what democracy needs. But also I would like to comment that sometimes there's a tendency that some civil society organizations spoil themselves by converting themselves into secret political parties. And this should not be like that, because the civil society is meant to fill the gap. And if we have to fill the gap, then we have to be open. And we are some sort of a bridge. Now here, we recognize what are the challenges of our time. We globally say, or in NAA, globally now is different. In a general term, we say the biggest challenge is poverty. But poverty is composed of so many factors. And as a civil society, we are organized in such a way that we tackle each one of these factors. Therefore, when we come here to TICAD, to a country like this, where they are asking us, what do you want us to help with? So we have to be very well organized and tell them what we need. Of course, where there are good governments, what the civil society needs are the same things the governments need. We have spoken here about infrastructure, and it was well said, infrastructure for what? To enhance agriculture, to enhance agricultural production. We have been speaking about this many times, say that they organize the peasants into cooperatives or association of peasants and so on, need the support in order to produce more food, support in roads, feeder roads and so on, supporting water, small water systems and so on. We have said this, but sometimes this was not being heard. Today, everybody is going to listen because the prices of food are rising. And I have heard that even in Japan, there's a problem of food now. So I think that we have to pay a lot of attention to this on both sides. Those who, our partners who are giving, because I'm also careful, like Museveni, to say that, well, they are not the donors only, we are also the donors, because we have the raw material and so on and so on. Yeah, but I think that the civil society in Africa is weak because we don't have the means even to pay for our own organizations, the functioning of our own organizations. So I think we have a challenge for both sides to get well organized, to specify what we want, and also the other side to concentrate on what they can give and give it correctly and on time. So this is 3 minutes. I saw that there was a lot of things to be said because the provocations were very good. But 3 minutes is very good.
Thank you very much, President Chisano. I was so intimidated. I put the paper here, but I just couldn't write time out. So I just left it. The next speaker I can only describe as a friend of Africa, and certainly a very distinguished friend of Africa, Bono. You also have 3 minutes, even though you're a friend.
Well, brevity is not a national characteristic of the Irish, but lucky I'm also here really more to listen than to speak, and I must say just very honoured to be here with Mr. Chisano, and I think it's a very, very wonderful sight to see somebody serve their people in whatever capacity they can. Some people like the work, some people like the job. I think it's better to like the work. And I think you're a remarkable individual, sir. I'm glad to be on the panel with you. As regards the role of civil society, I think it's very simple. The quality and the quantity of the aid depends on civil society. Both where we live in the so-called North, it is clear that the likelihood of governments in fulfilling their commitments depends on an active civil society and indeed the quality of the social movement around that. Individuals, as we know, can change very little. Social movements will always win the day. If you track the success and failures of fulfilling commitments that have been made recently, from the Millennium Development Goals to Gleneagles Summit there in Scotland in 2005, it's very clear where there's a well-organized and active civil society and deeply rooted social movement, they fulfill their commitments. Where there isn't, they don't. I think it's probably true to say that on the ground, in the developing economies where there's active and well-developed civil society, the money is spent better. So really, so much of this is so obvious it doesn't bear saying, but actually we do have to say it. And because, for instance, here in Japan, we're just at the very beginnings of growing that kind of social movement. We have had success in the United States with the One campaign. Rather controversially, we called it the National Rifle Association for the world's developing economies, just to stir things up. If you don't know what the NRA is, it means that if they work very aggressively on behalf of their clients in ways that shock and appall me, but there you go. And we have to do the same. We have to have active civil society that can hold people to account. I'd like to object to the title, Towards a Vibrant Africa. I think Africa is very vibrant. I think that's obvious. And I'd also like to challenge the idea of doubling of aid that's been announced in the newspapers. And we must be very respectful towards our hosts here, because I think they're very serious in trying to understand these issues and are capable of being a transformative presence on the scene, but it's kind of misleading to say a doubling of aid. When you look at the numbers, we see that it's just the bilateral aid that's being doubled, and in fact, AIDS sufferers will see that the Global Fund is not being doubled, and the list goes on. So there's a lot to play for between now and the G8, and we will win or lose that argument depending on the quality of civil society here in Japan. On the positives, I'll finish with this. Jubilee 2000, as you all remember, the debt cancellation, that was a very successful example of civil society getting organized, and I just want to use that as a model of what happens when we all work together. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bono. As you can see, the Irish can keep to 3 minutes. Our next speaker is Mr. Hartwig Schaefer, who is the Director of Operations and Strategy, Office of the Vice President, African Region, World Bank. I've taken 1 minute, you now have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Then I'll have to talk faster. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here as one of the co-organizers of TICAD. And let me pick up right where Bono left it off. Africa is a vibrant continent. The good news out of Africa has been coming for the last 5 years, and I could give you reports and reams of numbers. But just imagine, 1999, the Economist front page was a child soldier and a black map of Africa in the forgotten continent. 5 years later, National Geographic had a front page that says, anything you thought about Africa, think again. Then a year later, Business Week had a headline that says, everything that's right about Africa. And just last year we had Vanity Fair, specially edited by Bono, on Africa. The news on Africa is good. And it is good because civil society has had a good deal to do with it. I would venture to say that the news would not be as good out of Africa if civil society had not contributed, participated, and influenced it. And I would hope that civil society is going to continue doing that, because we cannot be complacent. The growth numbers are good, but they are fragile. Every time we look at Africa, something may go off track. So we need civil society in the democratization process, we need civil society in the economic process, and we need civil society in the capacity building process. Second, I would like to talk about TICAD. The difference of TICAD 4 is that it is not only about talk, but it has an action plan. A very detailed matrix of actions where the various partners are committing themselves to do, to provide additional funding, the focus, the activities, sometimes even down to the level of projects. We need civil society over the next 5 years. This is only a 2 or 3 day event. We need civil society to help us hold ourselves accountable that we deliver on this, and if we meet again in 5 years, we need to have a scorecard that says, this is what you promised in Yokohama, this is what you have achieved. And civil society has to play a role in this. Because it only makes a difference. And everything that we are doing here and discussing, we need to make sure that the woman in the township of Elmina in Nouakchott, who has purchased a parcel of land and now needs legal support because she can't use it, has civil society who is helping her. That the farmer in Detsa in Malawi has a road that goes to his farm, that he gets input, fertilizer, and he can grow a surplus so he can market it. And the children who are going to school in Rwanda, that they get a good education, vocational training, and eventually get jobs. This is where civil society plays a critical role in holding ourselves accountable that we deliver what we promise to the people of Africa. Finally, and I still hope I have 30 seconds. In terms of what the World Bank is doing, we are more committed than ever to working with civil society. When I started in the bank 18 years ago, it was unthought of that we would work with civil society, even meet them. We would avoid them and we would go on mission. I'm going to be very honest with you. But then came the likes around like Bono and others. And now it's impossible to think of going to a country and not consult with civil society. We actually need civil society when we talk about the extractive industry initiative that is helping manage the revenues from the oil and mineral boom. We need civil society because we can talk as outsiders. But if civil society as insiders are coming in, that is much more powerful. We need civil society in building fragile states' capacity. And we need civil society to empower local communities under CDD programs. So what I'm saying is civil society has an integral role to play in the preparation, implementation, and evaluation and monitoring of projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have to hear civil society say we need the World Bank. Our next presenter is the Director of Civil Society Organization Division of UNDP.
Thank you very much, Chair. I joined UNDP 4 years ago. Before that, I was the chair of the Council of NGOs in Senegal, and also the Secretary General of Federation of Grassroots Organizations in Senegal, but also the chair of Civicus. So what I would like to share with you, maybe I'll have to put my casket of UNDP aside a little bit, having been in the field of civil society for 25 years. Just first to congratulate you on the long way you come through, African NGOs and Japanese NGOs. And if I could, just in one point, I think Obayashi, in the white papers, you have cited the former Prime Minister who was talking about this maxim, this Japanese maxim, about having 3 arrows if you would like to really have solidarity. There is a fourth, the 3 arrows are the African states, the second one is the African people, the third one is the international community. But there is a fourth one, which is the Japanese people. And I think that is a point which is quite important to take into consideration. And also, I have heard this morning that people are talking about partnership. I would like to go beyond. Again, the issue of solidarity is on the main point, because you are talking about the TICAD des peuples. TICAD des peuples means re-putting people on the center of whatever we're going to do. So I think that's the first point I would like to put on the table. The second point is about democratization. From our perspective in UNDP, I mean, the issue of democratization is the point of capacity building. Meaning what? Meaning that what I would like to propose is from here to ensure that the strengthening of community-based organizations, farmers' movements are really taken into consideration, because the food crisis is something which is here. And this food crisis is going to be worse than any terrorist act and so on. And it is important to take it into consideration. Second point is, again, to help the civil society in Africa regain its place. And I think that with NGOs in the UN and the General Assembly of the UN saying that we are claiming our place, because the Charter of the UN is talking about we the people first. And the Charter of the United Nations did not say we the state, they say we the people. So I think it's quite important to take it into consideration. My third point is help the reconstruction of civil society in Africa. 20 years ago, we tried to do our best. In '87, I was one of the founding members of the Forum of African Voluntary Organizations in Africa. I think with this new collaboration between African, solidarity between African and Japanese civil society, there is a new possibilities to really rebuild the African civil society. My very last point is the issue of, when we talk about preventive diplomacy, you did not talk about, I think it's quite important point to take into consideration to fight the conflicts and so on. There is something that needs to be put on the table, and I would like to propose it also, is to ensure that the non-governmental diplomacy also is taken into consideration. We have tried something in the UNDP on that sense, meaning helping the umbrellas of NGOs to really work together around the world and ensure that they could have common positions concerning main issues. Maybe I should stop there.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Jin Matsumoto. He's one of the most famous Japanese journalists on African issues. Thank you.
I'm a journalist and have covered African affairs almost 27 years after the independence of Zimbabwe. And through my experience, I learned a very important thing, that we have to, how to say, tell whom we are assisting, whom we are aiding. The government, the people, which we are assisting. There's a very big difference. For example, I visited Zimbabwe last year. I found local NGOs helping peasant farmers in a very dry area, semi-arid area. And the government are intimidating them. In such case, when the Japanese government said that we are helping Zimbabwe, helping which Zimbabwe? Government or people? The quite big difference. And it's same in Equatorial Guinea, which we are helping. The Guinean government or the Guinean people, which that's quite big difference. Not all the government leaders of Africa is not like Mr. Chisano. So we have to we have to customize ourselves to think about the relation with Africa. Always we have to think about which we are, engaging the people or the government. The Japanese government announced that they double the ODA in the coming 5 years. But ODA to whom? That's very important. So in that mean, I'm very happy to find very active and vibrant faces of NGOs and the civil society of Africa, working very active, passive. And so I found here that we have a very nice partners in Africa. Not only the government, but the civil societies and NGOs. Thank you very much.
Now let me invite Madame Sumie Ishii. She's coming from 2008 Japan G8 Summit NGO Forum. We've been working very closely since this TICAD is different from the past 3 TICAD due to the connection with G8 Summit, which is coming in July. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunabe-san. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of 2008 Japan G8 Summit NGO Forum. 2008 Japan G8 Summit NGO Forum was established last year, January last year. So we have been working more than a year and a half. And I think the reason why I'm here today is to how perhaps we will make ourselves a commitment to ourselves to we will bridge this TICAD, the result, to the G8. And that's how we are aiming at for the rest of the period that we work. And G8 NGO Forum has 133 NGO members in Japan, and we are working in the 3 units. One is environment, and one is poverty and development, and the third is human rights and peace building. And in this process, I think this is also the first of its kind in Japan's NGO history. In the past, there is no this kind of scale, nor this kind of massive work that NGO have been. As Bono challenged us, we are on the process of developing, but like Japan's ODA, we may not be able to have enjoyed the sort of adolescent years, but we have to jump up from the children to the grown-up. There is no sort of the space that we are allowed to make any mistake, but because we have very huge network who support us internationally or globally or locally, I think with this network and with this solidarity among all the NGOs and civil society, I think we would be able to bridge this to the TICAD to the G8. And having said this, we still have one more thing that we have to do this after or beyond TICAD and G8. And TICAD, I know that is going to make the monitoring sort of mechanism, and same as G8. So what has been said, we have to watch and we have to monitor, and we have to be very vocal if there's any shortcomings that the government did not make their promise. And on this, we consider that the MDGs can be a very good sort of the framework that everyone agreed, and we would like to reiterate our commitment to advance MDGs. Thank you very much.
Now we invite the representative of the Japanese government, Mr. Hiroki.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for inviting us to this program. I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was posted in London in 2005 when the Great Britain hosted Grand Eagle Summit. I was excited by the leadership and the initiatives of Prime Minister Blair, but I was more excited by the concerts organized by Mr. Polo in Hyde Park and also in many other cities of the world, including Tokyo. Now, 3 years later, I'm in charge of TICAD 4 and G8 Hokkaido Toyaku Summit. Of course, my ambition is to make Japan's chairmanship more exciting than the one in Grand Eagles. We didn't organize concerts, but we wanted to reach out the hearts of the ordinary people in Japan. You may attract 30,000 people in Super Arena in Japan, but we chose a strategy to appeal to the public through media, especially the TV. You may have noticed the number of TV programs and good news coverage by Japanese newspapers in the past 3 to 4 weeks. Without the support of the grassroots Japanese people, government cannot increase assistance to Africa. In that sense, we are grateful to all the NGOs who pressured Japanese government to spend more for Africa. Now, I would like to reiterate some of the points that Prime Minister Fukuda announced this morning. Number one, Japan is going to double its ODA to Africa. That means we are going to spend 7.2 billion US dollars in Africa in the coming 5 years, 7.2 billion. That is net disbursement. Yes, it's basically bilateral because that's what we can control. Because we honor promises, Japan made several commitments in the past TICAD conferences. We have achieved all the commitments that we pledged. Once out of our mouth, we keep it. That's important. Number two, we are going to spend 4 billion US dollars on infrastructure and agriculture. It's not for the mega projects. Let me quote Prime Minister's speech. Quote, the infrastructure that Japan is to build must be the people's infrastructure, bringing prosperity to communities and the people living there. Unquote. Number three, government takes all measures to double our investment in Africa. I believe private investment is important to achieve poverty reduction through growth. I must admit that China is doing better than African states when it comes to poverty reduction. Finally, let me remind you one very important message from my government. We keep our promises. One promise is that we sincerely want to work together with civil society to alleviate poverty in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you said promises and that the Japanese government honor their promises, because this is one of the things I think that civil society is going to be focusing on quite heavily on the continent now, is to make sure that all these commitments and promises that have been made will be honored. So certainly we will be looking out for that. Now we open the floor for discussion. But as you can see, we are running a very tight schedule, so we will take 5 questions. Please, questions, not comments. Ask a question, 1 question only, so that we give others a chance. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Someone on this side? No? Nobody? Have I intimidated you that much? Okay, and 5. So, shall we start here? First question. Have we got a roving mic? Okay. Well, once you have the mic, please go.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask this double ODM. It should be continue to open bid and to stop the conditional ODA. The untied project should be. Therefore, we had a lot of the huge repayment were burden for HIPC countries. Therefore, I'd like to ask this Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it will be possible for untied project, because they said the African country has not enough technical ability or the disturbance of the government of the Africa, therefore it might be messed up for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Question at the back. That Mr. Old Abdullah? No.
Thank you very much. One question is to how conciliate bilateral development aid with community NGOs, civil society participation. Example, how to deliver healthcare, effective healthcare, community level, when there is no cooperation with NGOs working in health at community level. Today, we have a prize that it will be awarded to a prominent women working as a professional at community level. Thanks to their work at community level, we have effective aid going on for health. Question, how it is that the government of Japan will work on government level bilateral with communities? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question on this side.
Yes, my name is Hirono, and I'd like to ask the President Sano a question to you, sir. A lot of people have complained about the limited number of passes to the TICAD process, like 3 passes, 4 passes to NGOs and so forth. But I do believe that it is important for the African states, the government themselves, to really provide seats in their government delegation, the NGOs representative in their own government delegation. And this is something which I wonder why the African states have not done so this time also. Back in 1993, TICAD, later to all TICAD, I understand that African states have not provided seats to the NGOs in their own government delegations. So this is something which I do want you to answer this question, because you used to be the president. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure it's now easier for you to give an answer. Next question.
Okay. I would like to make a request to the World Bank and the ODA. Is it possible for the civil society organizations to be given a proportion of that money so that we can build our technical capacity and even organizational capacity to be able to actively participate in implementation of what will be agreed on in TICAD 4? Thank you.
Okay, and then we had a question here, and I will allow 2 more questions since we've been very disciplined. There's one here.
Thank you very much. My name is Flavia Pansiri and I'm the Executive Coordinator of the UN Volunteers Program, which will perhaps make my question somewhat self-evident. I've heard repeated reference to concepts of solidarity and commitment, which are key elements of any voluntary action that is carried out. Obviously, the contribution of civil society and the volunteer movement within civil society becomes key. How do you see the TICAD process facilitating a greater partnership between governments and civil society voluntary movements so that they can be better able to contribute to the common attainment of Millennium Development Goals? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kenny. I'm president of the TICAD Foundation, one a member of the TN network. And my question is to the World Bank and to maybe more than 2 or you, 3 of you there. There are many non-governmental organizations in Africa acting to support the government by implementing projects. But what we came to realize is that they are arranged, those activities are arranged within the informal sector of development in Africa. You know, the informal sector in Africa is also almost out of the policy, the development policy. So my question is, how is the World Bank and the donors, I'm also talking to the Japanese government, how are you seeing to it that the policy, the development policy is also encompassing the whole of these activities that huge NGO, most of them, some of them link with regional or country or communities, and they are very important. So this is my question. So I hope in the future.
Great, thank you. I think we've got the question. Charles, you have 20 seconds for your question. Charles, pass the mic down to Charles, and then we've got one question on this side.
Charles Abani, thank you for your presentations. My question really is around the social development agenda. We're still a gap of over 5 million health and education workers if we're going to deliver the basis. How are we going to find the money for this? It's not just about feeder roads and infrastructure, it's about recurrent budgets and recurrent spending on a long, medium term in a predictable way. Is this coming?
Thanks, Charles. Question on this side.
Thank you very much. My name is Yurika Yukawa. I also work with Ms. Shimi Ishii. My major topic is climate change. I'd like to know about the doubling of ODA from the Japanese government. Does it include adaptation to climate change, or is adaptation only from the Cool Earth Partnership that also Mr. Fukuda has announced? And also I'd like to ask the African governments what do they expect from Japanese government in order to prevent climate change. Thank you.
Siaka?
Okay, we have many questions to Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Hiroki. So could you start the question about untied aid? Second is a proportion of the money could go to, how much proportion of the money, increased money, ODA could go to civil society? And then also, what was it? Do you have the... Or the last point about climate change and also the recurrent cost of education.
You may want to hear more from Mr. Bono and others, and I don't want to steal your precious time. So, quick answers. Number one, we are honorable about this untying. We are honorable member of the International Committee, and OECD in Paris has set rules on untying, and we are keeping it. And almost 100% of loans are untied. Second, community level approach. Yes, we are working closely with NGOs, and some 400 NGOs in Japan are working with us right now. Number three, proportion of money should go to NGOs. Yes, in 2007 we spent $1.3 million to all the NGOs that I mentioned, and the number is increasing, and we are expecting to spend more. Predictability, yes, we have a rolling plan, so we have the predictability, and the reason that we announced that we are going to double in 5 years is to give more predictability to our ODA. Number five, climate change. Yes, I can answer in details later, so please come to see me. Thank you.
Well, we have an open discussion part after this part, so we will not let the MOFA get out without giving us an answer. Just for the sake of the time, I will let him go, but we will have the second part, and Mr. Aoyama has to handle that question. Thank you. Could I ask you to give us the answer?
Let me try to answer the question on what's the proportion of money that can be given to NGOs and civil society. I would not recommend that one does the earmarking off the top, but I can assure you that out of the funds that the World Bank is making available through governments to various countries in Africa, that a rough estimate is that almost 1/3 of this is going through community-based activities, involves NGOs and so on. So I could give you at some point the exact number, but more and more of the funds are really going through civil society as implementing agencies, as partners in development. I would also like to say that we have programs for building capacity within NGOs, because sometimes the procedures are cumbersome, fiduciary requirements are high. So for that, we understand that capacity needs to be built for local civil society organizations to really fully participate in the development process. There was also a question with regard to the informal sector. I think it's a very pertinent question, because a lot of the activity in Africa is in the informal sector. And here the focus is on micro projects, micro credit organizations, and so on, to help those parts of the informal sector to move into the formal sector, to become self-sufficient, to create a surplus and so on.
Thank you. Okay, now I would like to ask His Excellency, Mr. Sisano, to answer that.
Well, I think that the question which was put to me denotes a confusion. I'm no longer head of state, so I didn't have a delegation to bring here, whereby I had to cut seats and so on. So I don't know what happened in the delegations, whether they had to cut seats or not. But one thing I have to tell you, I'm here. Who paid for me is not my state, it's not my government. Those who invited me here have paid for my expenses to come here and participate. I don't know whether my head of state has brought more civil society, but I was invited in a separate place. So, but we have to take into consideration also that in a country there are many groups of civil society. How do you choose? How many? Who comes or who doesn't come? I think that this would depend on availability of funds. When I was head of state myself, I used to travel with many of the civil society and many of the private sector. But I had a plane, a big plane, which I lost. Because this plane was given to us, to my predecessor, but then they was taken back by those who had given him. And so, but in those days, we could move with many people. But this work would be questioned again. Why this head of state is moving with so many people? And people are starving at home. And this, you know, so I think that in an organization like this, one should have to determine what we want to do in that conference. And we tell the countries, we need a representative of this, this, and that. So we organize, we know what this man whom we are taking is going to do in that conference, and we bring him. So the organization must take care of this point, and not just each head of state to determine how many he is taking, because it will take a whole lot to fill this wall. But I had a comment to, before he leaves the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, I would like to have a precision. When you say that you have money for the NGOs, which NGOs are you referring to? Are you referring to the Japanese NGOs who are working in the countries there, or you are referring to the local NGOs?
Japanese NGOs and local African NGOs as well. So, all NGOs in the world.
I'm putting this question because sometimes the NGOs coming from the donor countries take part of the money back home. You know?
Thank you. Mr. Ken?
Maybe just building from where President Chisano has said, the issue of the solidarity and the volunteer is quite important for me in terms of, for 20 years we tried to have some kind of African volunteers corps. I think it would be very important if the Japanese cooperation, if the Japanese NGOs could also help and facilitate the work and the strengthening of African volunteers. Because 15 years or 20 years ago, I remember when we were in the NGO, the issue of why we don't have our Médecins Sans Frontières, African Médecins Sans Frontières, for example, Doctors Without Borders. And because we have a lot of problems, and I think we can really build a kind of core of volunteers, which is quite important, and I think it's a point that could be put on the table in cooperation with UNV and the UNDP and other UN agencies. Okay.
Thank you. I think we have dealt with most of the questions. If you have really good questions, 2 questions, I would like to open the floor. Here. One, you had a question. Okay, there. And it seems that Bas also has a question. And Mr. Jamie. Okay, Abdi? Just 30 seconds, please.
Well, I think TICAD had less focus on education, and I think this country, Japan, the secret of the successful story of economical growth and industrialization was based on massive investment in education. By the end of the 19th century, 98% of the Japanese were illiterate. So I think this is the secret of economic growth, which was less focused in this conference.
What is your question?
My question is why, you are talking about economic growth and you are not focusing on education, since you have half of the population in Africa.
It's a question
for the MOFA.
Okay, thank you.
A question for Mr. Hiroki. You asked for good pressure from civil society, and I'm just asking what kind of precise good pressure in the next month would you like from civil society to ensure that there is not just a doubling of bilateral ODA for Africa, but also that there is a doubling of the much larger amount of money which is in multilateral ODA, so that the doubling is a much larger doubling and more commensurate with the actual needs that Africa has in a development partnership with Japan. What is the pressure that would deliver that even better result in the next month?
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, Bas, it's your turn to ask a question.
This question is to all of the panelists that are here, particularly President Chisano and Bono. We have been coming to conferences like this year in and year out, and President Chisano, you've attended more than all of us have attended. Bono, you've held several concerts all around the world, focusing on aid on the continent, yet in 40 years, poverty has gotten worse. Corruption has gotten deeper. there has been some positive developments on the continent. And we need a paradigm shift on the continent. There's just 1 billion people left in the world that have not yet gotten out of poverty. 70% of those people sit on the continent of Africa. If we don't get this paradigm shift in the next 5 years, there will be a problem. What do you think is this paradigm shift, and how should we get it?
Okay, I will give a microphone to Mr. Hiroki. Please answer in 30 seconds, and then to Bono, another 30. Okay, there's another question to Mr. Hiroki from President Susano. Could you? Oh, okay. What are the? No, I cannot reach you.
No, it's still about the NGOs. What are the procedures for the NGOs to get the assistance allocated to them by the Japanese government?
Okay, thank you.
For your question, the last question, we have a homepage, so you can access it. But of course, you can email me, and then I can give you personal answers. About the education, yes, we are not only focusing on health, but education is very strong point of Japanese ODA, and Japan is very proud to be member of industrialized countries because we invested so much on education. So we do not neglect aid for education. And as for the pleasure, that's confidential. But two things are important. Yes, pleasure is important, but encouragement is also important. We do not want to lose faith. And it's important that you encourage us to work hard. Thank you.
Yes, okay.
I think that is a very honest answer, and I just want to say, having been to many of these gatherings, you know, what's maddening often is we've seen so many overpromise and underdeliver. What is extraordinary about the Japanese, as best exemplified by Hiroki-san here, is they absolutely deliver. They sometimes underpromise. And I think everybody would prefer that, and I think Mr. Arani's point is this is the maddening thing, is when you have to make budgets, you have to plan for the future. And I think it's this thing, this trait that we so admire in the Japanese, and so the Irish certainly lack, is modesty. I would have very high hopes for this G8. I think it has been an extraordinary meeting, and I think I really do think they're very serious about this. But to answer the other question, which is why, you know, what would it take? What's the paradigm shift? They've probably happened, but they're just not being followed through on. The Millennium Development Goals was a paradigm shift. It's just we're not following through on them. The Gleneagles Summit was a paradigm shift. It's just not being followed through on. And that's upsetting. Now, again, the Japanese have followed through on their part of the Gleneagles communique. I was there when it was signed, and we were hoping for them to get to a better number. But guess what? They do deliver. And I do think there's a shift also in the understanding of how the Japanese are very good at what we call the unsexy stuff. Infrastructure, all the things that the Africans really, really put as a priority, and sometimes the NGOs don't. And so that's what I would say.
Thank you, Bono. Lastly, Mr. San.
Well, yeah, it is a very short time to think about this question about paradigms. Of course, we have been in many conferences, but you see what happens in the conferences is that we come there, and each one of the participants speak his own mind. And all this is recorded, and then a resolution comes out. The resolution has got no, it's not in accordance with any planning where you have to measure the, what you call the means you have to implement the said resolution. And before this meeting elapses, you go to another conference, you speak about the same thing, a different resolution comes in. And so there's no way of monitoring the implementation of such resolutions because there are no measurements which are objective. And so the goodwill may be there, but we don't give ourselves time to really pass resolutions which go to satisfy the priorities, so the establishment of priorities. And another thing which I have witnessed is that the assumptions. We don't have time to discuss until we agree to have a common point of view about the assumptions. So the expectations we have are different when we leave the meeting. Because we assume, like now, the one who asked me about the presidents who brought a certain number of the members of his delegation, he has got an assumption of how the delegations are formed, which is not the same as those heads of states have. It's not the same as what I proposed here. So we have to have an assumption when we speak about fighting against poverty, what we mean. The assumption is, what is the situation today? How do we see that it may progress to the worse or not? Here are the means which we are proposing going to be valid. If they seem to be valid today, are they going to be valid tomorrow? So we go from sometimes wrong assumptions, or just we pass resolutions which are not compatible with the realities. So this happens, and we like to speak about all issues, and we don't set up priorities. I have been recently participating in a panel for the ADB, and it was very difficult to come to consensus, but finally we came to consensus. We have set up priorities. We were a small group. I know that one or 2 points will have people who are going to resist. For instance, we have proposed that the ADB should be joined with the fund, and the fund of ADB could tackle better the problems of Africa. But we hear that now some states are saying, no, the fund should be the fund, and the ADB should be the ADB. So we had assumptions, and we had some measurements. We have calculated what is going to happen from now to 2030. But they are speaking a different language. So this is what's happening with conferences.
Thank you very much, President Chesano, and thank you so much to all of our distinguished guests. That's a very good note to take a break on, prioritize.